HarperCollins presents A Sister's Song by Molly Green, read by Sophie Bentinck. To the people of Malta, who bravely endured the siege of Malta from June 1940 to December 1942, their island being harder hit than the London Blitz, and to the RAF, the Navy and the Merchant Navy, who defended the island, sacrificing many, but who won against all odds. To all the entertainers in Ensa, performing throughout the Second World War in Great Britain, Europe, the Middle East, and the Far East. The performers were often very close to the action, but carried on regardless, keeping up the morale of the troops and bringing them a little bit of Blighty. Chapter 1. Down, near Bromley, Easter, 1943. Suzanne stood in the wings of the village hall stage, poised to take her place by the other musicians. She couldn't stop shivering. Although it was mild outside, the hall was always cold, but it wasn't that. She had never before performed the solo in the finale of her favourite violin concerto in front of a real audience. Oh no, there was her cue. Just go and do it, she told herself sternly, holding her violin tight to her chest. Despite her trembling legs, she walked up the 3 steps to the wooden platform. The 8 other musicians turned their heads towards her as she nodded to them. Then, at the modest audience, she sat down, her fingers instinctively tracing the familiar curving outline of her instrument. Even though Suzanne couldn't see much in the gloom of the badly lit hall, she couldn't mistake Maman. Swathed in her fur coat, which she refused to discard until May, her tiny hat perched on her curls, her mother sat in the front row on one of the hard chairs, no doubt on the cushion she always brought with her. But where was Ronnie? She should be by Maman's side. But this was no time to start asking questions. The conductor looked at her with thin raised eyebrows. Suzanne settled her violin under her chin, took up her bow, and nodded. As soon as she played the first notes, she relaxed, now sure of herself. Barely aware of her surroundings, she half closed her eyes, the music filling her brain, her heart, and flowing through to the tips of her elegant fingers as the bow caressed the strings of her beloved violin. Her whole being was immersed in Mendelssohn's wonderful concerto, when, suddenly, the wail of an air raid siren stopped her in mid-stroke. Her heart jumped with fright. The sound rose and fell over and over again. She'd never heard one so close. Dear God, the Luftwaffe must be heading straight for Biggin Hill. Or Bromley. Or even down. Blood pounded through her temples. Her fingers fluttered. Would the hall be struck? Why weren't people rushing out of the door? Everyone on the platform stopped. Suzanne's heartbeat sounded in her ears as she looked over to the audience. One tall man at the back immediately sprang up, caught her eye for a brief moment and nodded, then shoved his hat on and quickly left. He certainly wasn't going to risk it by staying, and she couldn't really blame him. Oh dear, there was Maman on her feet. Should she go to her? No one else moved. They sat quietly on the hard seats, faces upturned, as though expecting to hear the rest of the piece. To her relief, she saw her mother look round at the others and quickly sit down again. Suzanne glanced at Mr. Rubinstein, the elderly conductor, who tapped his stand and said, "Back to the beginning of the solo, please, ladies and gentlemen." There was nothing for it but to obey. She nodded, her hand shaking.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?